The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glare on the polished desks of the office. I sat in my cubicle, fingers trembling over the keyboard, the faint scent of burnt coffee wafting through the air, mingling with the stale odor of recycled office air. Just hours ago, I had received a heartfelt gift from my colleagues, a beautiful desk plant that symbolized their support. But now, that gesture felt like a cruel reminder of my impending doom. I was about to be fired, just before claiming my hard-earned pension, and the weight of betrayal pressed down on me like a lead blanket. I glanced at the clock, the second hand ticking away the last moments of my corporate life. The office party that had seemed so jovial earlier now echoed with awkward laughter, the kind that masked discomfort and hidden agendas. I remembered how my boss's insincere smile had felt like a dagger to my heart, twisting deeper with each hollow compliment he offered. My mind raced back to the countless late nights and sacrifices I had made for this company, only to be discarded as if I were a mere cog in a machine. As the reality of my situation settled in, I felt a storm of emotions, confusion and anger swirling within me. How could they do this? I had given them my all. I could almost hear my mother's voice in my head, warning me to keep my head down, to avoid conflict at any cost. But I was done being silenced. I was determined to fight back, to uncover the truth behind this betrayal. My heart raced at the thought of what lay ahead. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, but the tremors in my hands betrayed me. I could feel the eyes of my coworkers on me, their whispers slicing through the tension in the air. Would they stand by me, or would they turn away? I had to believe that there were others who felt the same way, who would back me in this fight for justice. With that thought, I squared my shoulders, steeling myself for the battle to come. This was just the beginning of my journey, and I would not be reduced to a punchline. As I gathered my things, the plant sat there, a small, vibrant reminder of what I could lose. I wouldn't let this end without a fight. I was ready to take on the system, ready to expose the lies. This ends with me, I thought fiercely as I stepped out of the office for the last time, a mix of fear and determination surging within me. The fluorescent lights in my corporate office flickered, casting a harsh glare on my cluttered desk and amplifying the chaos in my mind. Stacks of paperwork lay strewn about like fallen soldiers, each one a reminder of the responsibilities I had just been stripped of. The smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air, mixing with the faint scent of desperation that seemed to hang over the office. I felt the familiar pang of sadness swell within me, a heavy ache that settled in my chest like a stone. Earlier that day, I had collapsed onto my living room floor, the weight of betrayal crashing down on me like a tidal wave. It was there, surrounded by the plush comfort of my couch, that I allowed myself to break down. I remembered the moment I received the news, my boss's words ringing in my ears as if they were a cruel melody. "We're letting you go, effective immediately." My fingers trembled as I clutched my phone, the screen blurring through my tears. How could they do this to me, after all I had given to this company, to this family? In the aftermath of that heart-wrenching moment, I found myself sitting across from my lawyer, a man who had seen too many cases like mine. His office was lined with bookshelves filled with legal tomes, the air thick with the scent of aged paper and polished wood. I could feel the tension radiating from him as I poured out my frustration. "I need to know my rights," I insisted, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and resolve. He leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed as he considered the implications of my case. "Olivia, you have a strong case, but it's not without risks. You have to be prepared for the fight ahead." The weight of his words hung heavily in the air, each syllable a stark reminder of the battle I was about to face. I could feel the pulse in my temples quicken, my heart racing with a blend of fear and determination. As I left his office, the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows over the bustling streets of New York City. I had never felt so small and so determined at the same time. The city thrummed around me, a cacophony of honking cars and distant sirens, yet I felt isolated within my own thoughts. Would I truly be able to take on the very corporation that had once celebrated my contributions? The thought sent shivers down my spine, but deep down, I knew I had to try. I had to reclaim my story, to prove that I would not be silenced, not now, not ever. I took a deep breath, letting the cool evening air fill my lungs as I walked home, ready to confront the emotional storm brewing inside me. The battle for justice had only just begun, and I was determined to emerge victorious, even if it meant facing my greatest fears. With every step, I felt the resolve solidifying within me, a promise to myself that I would not back down. I was ready to fight, even if it meant confronting the ghosts of my past, starting with the very ones that had betrayed me. The air in the mediation room was thick with tension, a stark contrast to the sterile decor that surrounded us. The walls were painted a muted gray, and the furniture was slick and modern, yet the environment felt stifling. I could hear the soft whir of the air conditioning, but it did little to alleviate the growing discomfort that clung to my skin. I sat at the table, my fingers fidgeting with the edge of my blazer, feeling the cool fabric against my clammy palms. My lawyer, David, sat across from me, his brow furrowed in concern as he reviewed the documents before him. "Olivia, I really think we need to consider a settlement," David suggested, his voice measured but tinged with urgency. "The company has deep pockets and they won't hesitate to drag this out. It's not just about the money. It's about your well-being." I felt a surge of frustration bubble within me. "But what about justice? They can't just get away with treating me like this." My voice rose slightly, echoing off the sterile walls. Memories of betrayal flooded my mind, how I had poured my heart and soul into that company, only to be discarded like yesterday's news. I could still hear the laughter of my colleagues at the last office party, how it had turned into awkward silence when my name was mentioned. David sighed, leaning back in his chair, his hands steepled together. "I understand, really, but the reality is this isn't just about you. This is about what happens next. If we push this too far, they may retaliate in ways we can't predict." The thought sent a chill down my spine. I could feel my heart racing, a primal instinct kicking in as I weighed my options. The stakes were high and the potential fallout loomed larger than I had imagined. "What's the point of fighting if I'm not going to win?" I muttered, more to myself than to David. A memory flashed in my mind of my mother's voice echoing in my ears, warning me against conflict. "You'll ruin our family's reputation, Olivia. Is it worth it?" I shook my head, trying to dispel the doubt creeping in. No, this wasn't about family reputation. It was about standing up for what was right. As I stared out the window, watching the bustling streets of New York City below, my thoughts spiraled. The city buzzed with life, yet I felt utterly isolated, trapped in this room with no clear way out. I could see the sun filtering through the glass, casting long shadows that mirrored the uncertainty gnawing at my insides. "I want to fight David. I can't let them walk all over me like this. I deserve better." My voice held a fierceness that surprised even me, but deep down I was terrified. The thought of losing everything, my dignity, my hard-earned pension, was paralyzing. David studied me, his expression softening. "I admire your determination, Olivia, but we must be strategic. Let's see what they offer before we make any decisions. We need to be prepared for anything." The conversation hung like a heavy weight in the air, and I felt a mix of hopelessness and determination. I knew I had to stay strong, to fight for what was right, but the path ahead felt treacherous. My heart thudded in my chest as I resolved to push forward no matter the cost. I would not be silenced. As we headed out of the mediation room, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass doors, my face resolute but weary. I was ready to face whatever came next, even if it meant diving deeper into a fight that threatened to consume me. This was just the beginning, and I wouldn't back down now. The walls of the law office loomed around me, their sterile white paint reflecting the harsh overhead lights, creating an atmosphere that felt suffocating rather than reassuring. I sat across from my lawyer, Jonathan, whose furrowed brow mirrored my own anxiety. The air was thick with unspoken words, the scent of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the musty smell of old case files stacked haphazardly in the corner. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the rhythm quickening as the weight of our conversation pressed heavily upon my shoulders. "Olivia, we need to discuss the ramifications of pursuing this lawsuit," Jonathan stated, his voice steady but laced with a hint of concern. I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed against the table, an involuntary response to the gravity of our situation. "I understand the risks, but I have to fight back. They can't just dismiss me and expect me to walk away quietly," I shot back, my voice rising in defiance. Memories of my colleagues' betrayal flooded my mind, their laughter over drinks, now a haunting echo of camaraderie that had turned to ashes. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms as if to shield himself from my intensity. "You need to weigh the potential fallout, Olivia. Going public could not only damage your reputation but could also draw the ire of powerful people within the company." His words stung, igniting a flicker of doubt within me. What if he was right? I could feel the heat rising to my cheeks, a mix of anger and fear coursing through me. I had already lost so much, the thought of losing my dignity made my stomach churn. "I won't let them silence me, Jonathan. This isn't just about me, it's about standing up for everyone who has been wronged. This ends with me taking a stand." I clenched my fists, the sharp edges of my nails pressing into my palms, grounding me in my resolve. Jonathan sighed, his gaze softening as he leaned forward, the tension in the room palpable. "I admire your courage, but courage without caution can lead to reckless decisions. You have to be strategic about this." His words echoed in my mind, but I brushed them aside, fueled by a surge of defiance. I recalled my mother's voice, always warning against conflict, urging me to preserve our family's reputation. Yet in that moment, I realized that I was no longer the obedient daughter she wanted me to be. I was Olivia, and I deserved my voice to be heard. I don't want to live in fear of what they might do. They took everything from me, and I refuse to let them win, I declared, my heart racing as I felt a new sense of clarity wash over me. As I left the law office, the city buzzed around me, the sounds of honking horns and distant sirens blending into a chaotic symphony. The weight of the decision settled heavily in my gut, but beneath that weight was a burgeoning sense of purpose. I was ready to expose the truth, no matter the cost. I would be the one to unearth the injustices buried beneath layers of corporate deceit. Arriving home, I was greeted by the warm glow of the living room, the familiar scent of Mark's cooking wafting through the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling in my mind. My heart ached at the thought of dragging him into this fight, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. As I walked into the kitchen, Mark looked up from the stove, his brow furrowed in concern. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice gentle yet probing. I hesitated for a moment, weighing my words carefully as I felt the tension building within me. It was intense. Jonathan is worried about the backlash, but I can't back down. "I have to fight for what's right," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, the gravity of my decision hanging in the air. Mark paused, his spatula hovering midair, the concern etched on his face deepening. "Olivia, I just want you to be careful. I support you, but this could get messy." His words resonated deeply. I could feel the weight of his worry pressing down on me, yet as I looked into his eyes, I felt a renewed sense of courage. I had to see this through. I was ready to face whatever came next, even if it meant confronting my deepest fears. As I stood in my kitchen, I realized that this was just the beginning. I was no longer the woman who had been blindsided by betrayal. I was becoming a force to be reckoned with, and nothing would stop me from seeking the truth. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the challenges ahead. My heart raced with anticipation. I could feel the tide turning, and I was determined to ride it all the way to the shore of justice. The atmosphere in my home office was thick with anticipation, the soft glow of the desk lamp illuminating the chaos of papers strewn across the table. Each document felt like a weight pressing down on me, whispering doubts into my ear. Could I really mend the rift I had created? The faint aroma of fresh coffee lingered, a comforting reminder of late-night brainstorming sessions, but tonight it did little to soothe the anxiety twisting my stomach. My fingers danced nervously over the keyboard, drafting messages to my colleagues, attempting to gauge their willingness to work towards reconciliation. My mother's voice echoed in my head, warning me not to stir the pot. "Conflict only breeds more conflict, Olivia," she would say, her tone stern and unwavering. I could picture her sitting in her favorite armchair, her expression a mix of concern and disapproval. Yet I felt a flicker of defiance rising within me. This was my chance to reclaim my narrative. I thought of the colleague who had once called me a friend and now regarded me with suspicion. The memories of our shared laughter felt like a distant dream, a stark contrast to the cold reality of our current situation. As I prepared for our upcoming meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was a pivotal moment. Hope battled against disappointment as I envisioned a room filled with familiar faces, some weary, others still burning with resentment. I imagined what I would say, how I would frame my message. The goal was clear: to demonstrate that I was not just a leader but a teammate willing to listen and adapt. I would lay out a roadmap for recovery, emphasizing our shared commitment to the company's mission and our clients. The evening before the meeting, I gathered with Mark and Sarah at our kitchen table, the light flickering overhead as I shared my plan. Mark leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed, a familiar sign of his ambivalence. "Are you sure this is the right approach? You know how people can react in these situations," he cautioned, his brow furrowing. I could see the concern etched across his face, and I felt a twinge of frustration. "I have to try, Mark. If we don't address this head-on, it will only fester. I can't let my ambition blind me again, but I need them to see that I'm still committed to our team and our goals," I replied, my voice steady, though my heart raced at the thought of their reactions. Sarah nodded, her expression softening, but I could sense her worry too. "Just be careful, Olivia. You don't want to come off as apologetic, but you need to acknowledge their feelings," she advised, her tone gentle yet firm. I appreciated her input, but the weight of the moment pressed heavily on my chest. I had to strike the right balance between assertiveness and empathy, and the stakes felt higher than ever. That night I tossed and turned, my mind racing through possible scenarios. What if they rejected my overtures? What if the meeting ended in chaos, further deepening the divide? With each thought, the tension coiled tighter in my gut, but I steeled myself for what lay ahead. I would face my colleagues, not just as their leader but as someone willing to admit mistakes and work together for a better future. The next morning I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my blouse and straightening my posture. The reflection staring back at me seemed determined, yet vulnerable. I was ready to confront the fallout of my decisions and fight for the bonds that had once united us. As I walked into the conference room, the familiar scent of coffee mingled with the tension in the air. I took a deep breath, ready to embark on this journey towards reconciliation, knowing that I had to be the bridge in this chasm I had unintentionally created. My heart pounded in my chest, a reminder that while I sought peace, the path would not be easy, but I was prepared to pave the way forward step by step. As I stood in the courtroom, the air crackled with tension, an electric charge that seemed to pulse through my veins. The bright lights overhead illuminated the faces of my former colleagues and the opposing legal team, their expressions a mix of disdain and determination. My heart raced, the anticipation building like a coiled spring ready to snap. I had prepared for this moment, but now, as I faced the judge, I felt the weight of every decision weighing heavily upon me. The room fell silent as my lawyer, James, stood to present our case. His voice was steady, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. I clenched my fists in my lap, a physical manifestation of the chaos swirling inside me. Memories of betrayal flashed through my mind, those moments when I had felt so alone, so misunderstood. But I couldn't let that darkness consume me now. This was my chance to reclaim my narrative, to prove that I was more than just a pawn in their corporate game. The opposing counsel rose, a smirk playing on his lips. "Miss Olivia, you claim that your termination was unjust, yet it was your decisions that led to the company's downfall. How do you respond to that?" His voice dripped with condescension, and I could feel the anger bubbling within me. This was it, I had to seize this moment to turn the tide. "I took those risks to protect our company's future, to ensure its survival," I replied, my voice breaking through the tension like a beacon of defiance. The words felt powerful, a declaration of my intentions. I could see my mother in the audience, her face a mask of shock and disapproval, but I was past her influence now. She had tried to control the narrative for far too long, but this was my time to shine. The judge's gavel struck the desk, reverberating through the room like a thunderclap. "Order." "I will not tolerate such outbursts," he warned, but I felt a surge of empowerment, a sense of control that I had longed for. My heart raced with the thrill of fighting back, of standing up for myself and my beliefs. This was the turning point I had been waiting for, and I wasn't going to back down. As the tension in the room thickened, I caught the eye of Lisa, my best friend, and a flicker of support passed between us. I knew I wasn't alone in this battle. I could feel the energy shift as I spoke again, my voice steadier now, fueled by determination. "I will not be reduced to a punchline in their story. This ends with me taking back control of my life, my narrative, and my future." The murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd, but I could sense the tide turning. I had stepped into my power, and the chaos around me began to fade as I focused on my truth. This was a moment of reckoning, a pivotal point that would change everything. I was no longer just a victim of circumstance. I was a force to be reckoned with, and I was ready to fight for what was right. As I finished my statement, the room erupted in a cacophony of whispers and gasps, and I could feel the weight of their judgment, but it no longer mattered. I had found my voice amid the chaos, and that was all I needed to seize control of my destiny. The dim light of my home office flickered as I sat hunched over my desk, papers strewn about like the chaotic thoughts swirling in my mind. The scent of old coffee lingered in the air, mixing with the faint smell of wood polish from my desk. I needed to strategize, and the weight of my resolve pressed heavily upon me as I prepared to take the fight to my former employer. My heart raced in anticipation of the actions I needed to take. I flipped through a notebook filled with hastily scrawled ideas and plans, my fingers trembling slightly as they brushed over the pages. Each line represented a piece of my strategy, a roadmap toward reclaiming what was rightfully mine. I recalled the faces of my colleagues, those who had stood by me, and the betrayal I had felt in the boardroom. I had to ensure this revenge was calculated, not reckless. There was too much at stake. My mind drifted to the lawyers I had consulted, their stern faces reflecting a mix of skepticism and hope. "You'll need undeniable evidence to make a strong case," one had said, urging me to focus on the discrepancies in the company's dealings. The memory of their words fueled my determination. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I envisioned the moment I would finally unveil the truth, the satisfaction of watching those who had wronged me squirm under the weight of their own deceit. I began drafting a timeline of events, a meticulous outline of meetings, decisions, and communications that had led to my termination. The act of writing felt cathartic, each stroke of the pen a step closer to justice. I paused, reflecting on the emotional toll this journey had taken on me. My fingers hovered over the paper as I considered how to balance my need for vengeance with the risks involved. Would I lose myself in this quest? As I continued to sketch out my plan, I felt a surge of clarity. I needed allies, people who believed in my cause and would stand beside me. I envisioned gathering a small group of trusted colleagues, those who had shared in my struggles and understood the depths of my betrayal. Together, we would expose the corruption that had festered in the company, a united front against the injustice I had faced. This was not just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my dignity and ensuring that the truth would prevail. I drew a deep breath, my resolve hardening. I would not let fear dictate my actions any longer. I would see this through, not just for myself but for everyone who had been wronged. The echoes of my past decisions began to fade, replaced by a fierce determination to take control of my narrative. The time for action was drawing near, and I was ready to unleash the plan that had been brewing within me. The courtroom buzzed with a tense energy as I took my place at the plaintiff's table, the air thick with anticipation and the faint scent of polished wood mingling with the lingering aroma of coffee from the morning break. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the weight of this moment. This was it, my chance to reclaim my narrative, to turn the tables on the company that had wronged me. The faces of jurors stared back, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism, and I could feel the pressure mounting like a vice around my chest. As the proceedings began, I glanced at my mother, Evelyn, seated in the back, her face a mask of disapproval. Her presence was both a comfort and a burden. I knew her expectations weighed heavily on me. I recalled the countless times she had pushed me to prioritize reputation over truth. Would she see this as my fight for justice or merely another misguided ambition? A shiver ran down my spine as I pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on why I was here. The opposing counsel rose, a polished figure with an air of arrogance that made my skin crawl. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here to discuss the so-called injustices that Miss Olivia claims to have endured. But let me remind you, she was a part of the decision-making process that led to our current predicament. Is it not hypocritical for her to now seek reparations?" The words dripped with disdain, and I felt a familiar heat rise in my cheeks. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I had to respond to this, to show them that my fight was not just about money but about integrity, about the people who had suffered due to the company's ruthless practices. I rose to my feet, my pulse quickening as I stepped forward, the weight of my resolve pushing me onward. The murmurs in the courtroom faded into a distant hum as I began to address the jury, my voice stronger than I felt inside. I didn't come here to vilify anyone, I came here to expose the truth behind the curtain of corporate greed. We were all part of a system that prioritized profit over people, and I made a mistake in believing I could change that from within. But my actions were not without consequences, and for that, I am here to take responsibility and seek justice for not just myself, but for everyone affected by those decisions. My words resonated through the room, and I could see a flicker of understanding in the eyes of the jurors. As I finished, I felt a wave of relief wash over me, and for a moment I dared to hope that they might see the sincerity in my plea. The tension in the air shifted, and I could sense a newfound energy as the jurors exchanged glances, assessing the gravity of my words. I had taken a stand and it felt liberating, but the battle was far from over. The opposing counsel quickly regained control, throwing questions at me in rapid succession, each one designed to undermine my credibility. "Is it not true that you were aware of the risks involved when you implemented the budget cuts? How can you claim victimhood when you were an active participant in the decision-making process?" Each question felt like a dagger, and I fought to maintain my composure under the weight of their scrutiny. With every response, I felt the fire of determination grow within me. I was no longer just defending my actions, I was fighting for the voices of others silenced by the corporate machine. I recalled the faces of my former colleagues, the laughter we had shared, and the bonds we had forged, now fractured by ambition and profit margins. I could not let their stories be lost in this battle. As the day wore on, the courtroom echoed with the tension of our exchanges. I was exhausted but resolute. I glanced at Evelyn again, her expression softening just slightly as she absorbed my words. Maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to understand that this fight was about more than just me. It was about standing up for what was right. When the day finally ended, I left the courtroom with the weight of my journey heavy on my shoulders, but also with a spark of hope ignited deep within. I had faced my fears, exposed the truth, and made my case. I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. This was not just a battle for compensation. It was a step toward closure, a chance to reclaim my dignity and restore my faith in justice. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to embrace whatever came next. My fight was far from over, but I was no longer afraid. As I sat at the dinner table, the familiar warmth of home wrapped around me like a comforting blanket, yet the tension lingered just beneath the surface. The aroma of my mother's famous roasted chicken filled the air, mingling with the faint scent of lavender from the vase on the table, a stark contrast to the chaos I had recently faced. My family gathered around, their faces reflecting a mixture of concern and tentative hope, each of us grappling with the aftermath of my tumultuous journey. You did what you had to do, Olivia, my partner Mark said, his voice steady but laced with an underlying worry. I could see the way he fidgeted with his fork, his brow slightly furrowed as he searched for the right words. It's about rebuilding trust now, not just with your colleagues, but with yourself. His words resonated within me, a reminder of the long road ahead. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of my choices pressing down, yet I also sensed a flicker of resolve igniting within. Reflecting on the recent board meeting, I felt a swell of satisfaction. The discussions had been intense, but they had also opened a door to healing. I had laid bare my mistakes, and while skepticism had filled the room, the seeds of hope had begun to take root. The thought of forging a new path with my team brought a sense of purpose that I had been missing for far too long. I glanced at my family, their unwavering support a steady anchor amidst the storm. I know it won't be easy, but I'm determined to make things right, I said, my voice stronger now, filled with conviction. My mother, usually the voice of tradition, nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting a mixture of pride and concern. Just remember to balance ambition with empathy, Olivia. It's a tough world out there, but you have the strength to navigate it. Her words felt like a blessing, a reminder that I was not alone in this journey. As we shared stories over dinner, laughter began to emerge, a soft melody that reminded me of the bonds we had forged through adversity. The shadows of doubt began to lift, replaced by a renewed sense of hope for the future. I realized that while the road to redemption was fraught with challenges, it was also filled with opportunities for growth and connection. In that moment, I embraced the newfound clarity. I was ready to face whatever came next, not just for myself but for those who believed in me. The journey ahead was not merely about reclaiming my position, it was about rebuilding relationships, fostering trust, and ultimately proving that I could lead with both strength and compassion. This was just the beginning of a new chapter, and I was eager to see where it would take me. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue across my living room, the remnants of a long battle finally giving way to a peaceful silence. I sank into the plush embrace of my couch, feeling the weight of the past months lift slightly as I reflected on the journey that had led me here. The air smelled faintly of lavender, a calming contrast to the chaos I had endured, and I took a moment to breathe it in deeply, letting the tranquility wash over me. My phone buzzed on the table, a reminder that this was a new chapter, one where I could share my story with others. The thought of my experience